Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Stolman. I am the K-3 Literacy PD Specialist here at the Louisiana Department of Education. Joined with me today is Ms. Natalie Kleber, our Middle and High School Professional Development Specialist, and Ms. Katasha Edwards, our Leader Professional Development Specialist. And we're excited today to bring you guys Focusing the Lens, analyzing mid-year screener data for maximum impact. Now, we just want to let you guys know that this professional development really is most appropriate for site level leaders, including administrators and instructional coaches. Could also be relevant for district level leaders. Teachers are welcome to watch, but we will provide you guys with a professional learning segment focused on how you can use that screener data most effectively. But today's segment really is geared at site level leaders. So just going to keep that in mind if you are, approaching this today. So our desired outcome for this session today is truly to increase the data capacity of our participants as it relates to the use of literacy screener data to improve literacy outcomes for students. This is such an exciting time in the school year because we're about to administer our mid-year screeners. And really, these are the most important and the most exciting screeners that we administer for two reasons. One, it's a measure of the work that we've done so far this year. But two, it's also hopeful in the sense that we still have half a year to kind of fill any gaps that we see, and to really make a difference to ensure that all of our students are leaving prepared to read in a way that's going to support them to be successful in the next grade level. So we really take this information seriously and really use it to drive practices that are going to lead to improved literacy outcomes. So we're excited to talk to you guys today just about some specific strategies that you can use to do that. Now, when I use the phrase data capacity, what I'm talking about is the ability of educators to effectively utilize educational data to improve outcomes for students. So data capacity, it involves so many different components. One, having adequate infrastructure to collect, aggregate, and disaggregate data. Hopefully you guys have figured out a system to administer these screeners and to manage the data that comes in for these screeners. The ability that you have to interpret that data. But most importantly, and probably the hardest thing of all, is to really connect the insights that we gather from this process to future action, because that's what's going to lead to change. So we really want to be able to take this data, understand what we're getting from this data, the information that we're getting from this data, and how we can use that to really improve these literacy outcomes. What specifically can we do? And that's what we're going to cover today. Now, building meaningful data capacity, it really requires reflection on how data is most appropriately used by the individual or group using it. And that's something I really want us to think about today, because as a site level leader, the way that you approach and utilize data is going to be very different than the way we might expect a teacher to approach and utilize data, or the way we might expect a district level leader to approach or utilize data. And it's important to keep that in mind. Nowhere is it more important to keep that in mind than in the context of analyzing our literacy screener data. You know, our approach should differ depending on the role that we play. And so we're going to talk through how each of these different groups can most effectively utilize data to improve literacy outcomes.
So now we're going to talk about focusing the lens. And today we're going to build our own data capacity by focusing the lens and spending time reflecting on how administrators, coaches, and teachers can most effectively utilize mid-year literacy screener data and ensure that students are demonstrating reading proficiency by the end of the year. As Sarah alluded to, you have a whole half a year to remediate whatever findings that we have. So that it brings this sense of hope, to really remediate whatever they're needing. So mid-year literacy screening provides important data on students' progression to reading proficiency. How close are they? How close aren't they maybe? It's important because it is a direct reflection of the instruction that students have received during the current school year. What have they learned? What gaps are they having still? What do they still need before the end of the year? Literacy screener results have been proposed as a central component of the future K-2 accountability structure. It's so essential that our K-2 students move into the upper grades with the skills they need to be literate. Mid-year literacy screener data kind of continued is how we approach and utilize mid-year literacy screener data depends on our role within the school. And Sarah said that this session mostly focuses on our school level leadership team, but you have a different hat for each. And we're about to dive into how your hats can look different and what you should do with the data at that level.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back in and we're going to talk a little bit about teachers, right? We know that our focus today is on how administrators and site level leaders can utilize literacy screener data. But just as important as you understanding how you use the data, we also have to have an understanding of how we expect our teachers to use this data as well. So when we think about our teachers, we want them to think about the screening data as really a checkpoint. There should be no surprises when we get to our screening data because they've been collecting data all along through their daily formative assessments. And so we want our teachers to really compare the benchmark status of students to the curriculum-based daily formative assessment and summative data. Do their scores align with how the student is performing in class, or is there a discrepancy? And what might be the cause of the discrepancy? You know, we don't want our teachers to be surprised by data. We want it to confirm what they're seeing every day. And when we think about a screener, you know, a screener is really agnostic, a curriculum agnostic. It doesn't matter what curriculum you're using, right? It's going to tell you, are your students on track to read proficiently by the end of the year, or do they need additional support, right? But it should correlate with what you're seeing in your class. So if your students are performing very well in your curriculum, you would expect that they're benchmark. Like, these are students who are doing very well. If your students are constantly needing additional support and they're not making the progress that you might see, these are the kids that you might expect to be in the yellow or in the red or in your screener. It's not going to specifically measure the skills that you're looking at in your curriculum, but it is going to tell you whether or not your students are thriving in the core or whether or not they need additional support. Now, one thing you might really think about as an administrator that you might want to do is to have your teachers predict which students might not be at benchmark, both overall for their composite score and within specific categories based on their existing formative data. As I said, we don't want surprises. We don't want our teachers saying, oh, wow, I never would have thought that kid would be in the red. It really should line up with what they're seeing every day. And having our teachers kind of make these predictions ahead of getting this information might prompt some reflection on their part to think about why is there a discrepancy, right? Why am I surprised? Or, yeah, this kid, you know, this is what I'm seeing every single day in my class. He's a proficient reader. You know, he's successful with all of the different things that we're doing in our curriculum, and he's doing well on dibbles. Keep moving it, keep doing the same exact thing, or wow, you know, this isn't what I'm seeing at all, or maybe I'm not collecting enough formative assessment data. And these are all great things for you to think about as an administrator in guiding your teachers. Now, another way a teacher might look at this screener data is confirming students who are not on track to achieve reading proficiency and those students who might be candidates for intervention programs and or classroom-based small group instruction, right? So when we think about, you know, we might have interventionists at our school, we might have people who kind of come in to provide additional support, maybe some push-in support. And we're going to look at this, and the students who are scoring at the bottom are the students you're really going to want to target for these additional interventions, right? And you're also going to want to make sure that you're seeing those kids in your small group time too. You know, a kid who is in the yellow or in the red is not going to get into the green by the end of the year without some significant intervention. And whether or not it's a pull-out or a push-in intervention or it's small group support that the teacher is providing, they're going to need that if they're going to make that growth that they need. And so you really want to be mindful of that. You can't just forget about these kids. They're going to need that additional support. And we also want to look and see, are there kids who are falling behind into lower benchmark categories? So maybe at BOY, I had this student and he was, solidly at or above benchmark. And now he's really significantly below benchmark. I really need to be thinking about why that might be. I'm going to look at that daily formative assessment data that I've been collecting, but I'm also going to start, thinking about many other reasons that might explain, have we gotten into more complex content? Has this child been absent a lot? Are these, and how am I going to fix that, right? Like, because just because he's been absent a lot is not an excuse. We have to figure out how we're going to use that time that we do have this child and really support him such that he's going to make significant gains by end of year. And that's the exciting thing, because it is very doable and very fixable if you're strategic and targeted with your work. So a teacher is going to look at their data in this way, but go to this next slide here. But for teachers, screener data is all about reflection. The question they really need to think about is, does it correspond with what I'm seeing in class? A teacher should not be waiting until they get their screener data to make instructional decisions, right? A teacher is making instructional decisions for tomorrow based on what she saw the kids do today, right? So it's a checkpoint. And, among all of the different groups that are looking at screener data for teachers, it's probably the least, I'm not going to say least important, but in a sense, least interesting, because they should really already know what their students know and can do. And the screener data should correspond with that. So it's a checkpoint. And if there is a discrepancy as a leader, the things that you're going to want to ask, or questions you're going to want to get an answer to, is, do you teachers have a system for collecting and analyzing meaningful formative assessment data each day, right? Are they just kind of skipping those opportunities? Are they not analyzing data at all? Maybe they don't have a good system. They don't have a good organizational system for doing that. And that's a way that you or your literacy coaches can support these teachers in developing a system for doing this each and every day. And I'm not talking about formative assessments that come from outside of the curriculum. I'm talking about the formative assessments that are embedded within your curriculum. They're there in all of our curriculum. We just have to have a way for ensuring that we are analyzing these and managing this data so that we're seeing this progress over time. Now, if we have a teacher who's doing that, who is doing that regularly, but we're still seeing some issues or some gaps, the next thing we want to start asking is, do I know how to support my students if the formative assessment data reveal that they haven't mastered the skills or the content taught? So if, I might have students and they're struggling every day. I know they're struggling every day. I can pull out my binder of information and show you every single activity that they've struggled with, but I don't know what to do in that tier 2, that small group support. And that's a very real problem that many of our teachers face. I don't know what to do, right? Like, the kid is a disfluent reader, but I don't know how I can support them. And that's where you might gear the work of your coaches or your instructional support. You're going to provide that support for them in that way. So you're going to help them figure out, what are some meaningful things that they can do to grow these students? How can they measure that progress, right? And really see that change by end of year. So these are questions that you're going to want to ask. But first and foremost, you need to make sure they have that system for collecting and analyzing data each day. And again, just to drive it home, screener data for teachers is a checkpoint. It's not designed to drive their daily instructional decision-making. They're not waiting for that screener data to tell them what to do tomorrow or for the rest of the year, right? It's just going to confirm what they see every day, or kind of make them reflect on their practice a little bit. There should be no surprises. And I can't underscore that enough. It really, that's not to say there might not be an outlier here or there that you might want to dig into. A student might have had a bad day or something like that. But we're not looking for big time surprises here. You really should know what's happening. And I think that's just really something that you want to drive home with your teachers. So now we're going to transition to Pitasha, who's going to talk about how administrators and coaches, site level leaders, can analyze screener data.
Thanks, Sarah. Just as Sarah has said, she really highlighted what teachers should do with their mid-year data. But when you think about your school-based leaders and coaches, your mid-year data really is a golden nugget. It is an opportunity for you to really be able to assess how the core instruction and interventions within your schools, for you to get a pulse check of how they've been going. So you're going to look at school-wide and grade level trends. You're going to look at how your school compares to the district average. And then also as a leader, you're going to be able to really key in with your observations and provide targeted support for teachers, because based on your school-wide data, you may have a teacher who had, a high percentage of students that were benchmarker in the green for the beginning of the year data. And if those students are not making meaningful progress and they show up in the red for mid-year, as an administrator or a coach, there's an opportunity for you to key in and provide some targeted, specific support for those teachers based on that data. You're also going to look at areas, school-wide, grade level wide, of where you may need to focus and provide professional development. For example, if your students are struggling with first sound fluency or phoneme segmentation fluency, there may be an opportunity for that coach to go in and support some phonemic awareness components in the CKLA lesson or integrity. But if you have a grade level that is struggling or being more challenged in the area of fluency, then there's an opportunity for that coach or for the administrator to go into those small group lessons to see what that fluency and what those small group 1 and 2 look like. What's happening within those lessons to support the fluency of those students. And really, as an administrator, you're responsible for supporting your teachers, but also supporting your coaches. So you're going to provide some strategic support for your coaches aligned to that data. So when you sit down with your leadership team and you identify those areas in need of support, you're going to outline a plan so that you or those coaches or additional persons on your leadership team are able to push in to those classrooms to really assess what's going on, provide support for those teachers, and develop professional development opportunities. Another opportunity too is when we think about school labels of UIR, UIN, it's a prime opportunity to begin early to identify subgroups that may be struggling early on. So you're gonna think of opportunities to support those reading foundations as a preventative measure to prevent our subgroups from falling into these categories. So as for administrators, and we talked about it being a golden nugget, but really it's more of your roadmap for support. This is where you're going to really clearly identify if there are any shifts that need to take place, and specifically how you're going to make these shifts. You're going to identify those areas of need, who's going to support those areas, and what resources you're going to use. Are you going to redefine your interventions and supports? Are you going to take a closer look at your core instruction and maybe make some adjustments there? So specifically as a leader, and you'll see with the attached documents, there is a roadmap document for you really to take each of those individual measures and really clearly identify how your school or district performed with those measures, and then what do I need to do as a leader to support these areas? Because as leaders, we're not teaching individual students, but we're responsible for developing a plan to provide opportunities for us to enable the context of the work that's taking place with those individual students. So just think about, in terms of observation, and we think about no matter which rubric you use for observation and feedback, you want to be really, really strategic, especially in times like now. With the pandemic, we know that time is a commodity. So we want to be very strategic with our time and providing those observations and giving really targeted, specific feedback for our students, to support our students via our teachers and coaches. So just as we said before, when you're doing your schedule and when you're scheduling with your coaches, I think about my experiences as a leader. We would sit down to do our weekly schedule. make sure that you're using your data as a part of those weekly schedules. So if you're looking at your mid-year data now to develop a plan for support, then you're going to be a part of those conversations moving forward where you're assessing progress and progress monitoring with that weekly formative assessment. Drilling back to the mid-year data, based on our mid-year data, we need additional support in phonemic awareness. So then we're going to push into those classrooms during that time. We're going to look at the data from the daily formative assessment, and then we're going to be strategic with providing intervention and support. So hopefully by the end of the year, we're able to either see students continue on that trajectory of success by remaining benchmark, or maybe possibly moving students that are in that strategic area or even that intensive area to the benchmark level by making those specific adjustments. So if we look at this slide, and there's a document that's linked here that really outlines this question. The question is, how can I use my curriculum to support my mid-year data screening results? So you'll see here, this document really outlines every specific measure that is assessed during the mid-year screener. And then it looks at the specific areas of where you should focus to provide support. Like, for example, it shows the measure, the grade level, and the focus. What was the focus of that measure? If, as a leader, you have questions about first-time fluency, the document outlines that was supporting in phonemic awareness. And then you're able to look at how can I specifically, as a leader, how can I support teachers and coaches in this area so that we can show improvement in this area? Even down to looking where to focus in your curriculum. What part of the lesson should I see this? And a good example of this is, as a leader, if you walk in to your classrooms and you see letters connected during your phonemic awareness activities, there should be a flag, for you as a leader to know that we should not see this during this part of instruction. So really, just as a team, for you to use that roadmap, to sit down and to use this document to really identify what was measured, what was the focus of this measurement, and how can you support it? So I think that you will find it's a very powerful document and a very useful document, and really helps to connect with the curriculum that you use.
So now it's time for us to jump into the scenario portion of our presentation. And I encourage you to either pull up or print out the scenario document that goes along with this part. And you're going to put into practice some of the principles that we've been talking about so far today. So let's set the context. Pelican Elementary School is a Title I school located in a suburban community in Louisiana. During the 2021-2022 school year, 81% of the students at Pelican Elementary are identified as economically disadvantaged. 76% are students of color, 17% of students have disabilities, and 3% are English language learners. Teacher turnover is a concern at Pelican Elementary, and 80% of the teachers have 5 years of teaching experience or less. The school has adopted both strands of CKLA, both the skills and the knowledge strands, and there are 2 school-based literacy coaches there. The school has also recently adopted an intervention program to try to meet the needs of their most struggling readers. So now that we know the context, let's start diving into the scenario. So review the data provided on page 1 of the scenario document that I was telling you about, and then use this information to guide your responses to each of the following questions. Number 1, review the changes from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year for each grade level. What do you notice? What trends are you noticing there? Number 2, do you notice any school-wide areas of need? Are there grade-specific areas of need that are a specific concern? Number 3, for these identified areas of need, how or where are they addressed in the curriculum? And be as specific as possible. You can also please refer to the support guide that we just finished referencing for any help that you might need as you go through the work. Number 4, consider a reasonable goal for the end of the year improvement. So for instance, you could say something like at least 10% more students will have a composite that is at or above benchmark in each grade level. As a leader, what specific steps, now that you've set that goal, what specific steps can you take to target the identified areas of need? How can you leverage the resources at your school? So those coaches and the interventionists, what can you do to support the teachers in the classroom to go towards achieving your end of year goal? What will you do to monitor your progress to ensure you're on track to achieve this goal? And so as administrators, there's so many things on your plates. And this is the part where sometimes the ball drops because you're so in the weeds of everything that's happening, and we make these fantastic plans and there's no monitoring or follow-up, and that's where the ball drops. If this part is tight and it kind of keeps happening, you're going to see tremendous growth between your middle of year and end of year data. Okay, so specific teacher scenarios. Let's see what's happening with the teachers at Pelican Elementary. So Ms. Perkins is a first grade teacher in her 3rd year of teaching. She's always prepared for her lessons, and she seems knowledgeable about the curriculum and its components during collaborative planning sessions. Mr. Fry is a veteran teacher, and he has been teaching first grade at Pelican Elementary for 11 years. He's also prepared and seems knowledgeable about the curriculum and its components. He's currently serving as your school's literacy content leader. Acadian's data for their classes are provided in the table that you're going to view in the scenario. For comparison, school and district data are also provided. Assume these teachers are both speaking honestly and are committed to doing whatever it takes to grow their students. Okay, so here's teacher scenario 1. As a leader, you meet with each teacher independently as part of a quarterly data review process. When you review these data with Ms. Perkins, she's visibly upset and says that she is surprised that so many of her students are now below benchmark. She wants to see growth in her students, but she doesn't know what she is doing wrong, as she feels as though she's implementing the curriculum with fidelity. What additional questions might you ask Ms. Perkins to deepen your shared understanding of why her scores are falling? As a leader, what might you do to target your support based on the information provided here? And be as specific as possible, because this really helps you get to the root of the problem and get creative about what kind of solutions you can offer to Ms. Perkins. All right, teacher scenario 2. In your meeting with Mr. Fry, he's concerned by the number of students who remain below benchmark, but he's not surprised. The Acadian's data directly align with the formative data he collects each day. He communicates that he also wants to see growth in his students. What additional questions might you ask Mr. Fry to deepen your shared understanding of why 40% of his students are not at benchmark? As a leader, what might you do to target your support based on the information provided here? And again, be as specific as possible. And this is a great place to go ahead and pause and have these discussions with your leadership team now. We've also provided some ideal responses for you that you can refer to, but don't cheat and look at those yet. Go ahead and have these rich conversations, and then you can come back to the ideal responses to see if they kind of line up with what we were thinking.
So I want to thank you guys all for joining us today. If you do have questions or you need additional support, or you just want some more information on how you can utilize this data, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We're happy to support you guys in any way. You can reach out to Katasha as our leader professional development specialist, to Natalie if you have questions about middle or high school, or to me if you have questions about K-3 literacy. We're happy to support you and be a thought partner with you as you do this important work, because, you know, as we mentioned earlier in the session, you know, this is a time for hope. It's a time for excitement, because we know we're going to fill those gaps by the end of the year, because we're going to target our support and we're going to really make a difference. So enjoy your MOY screening experience, and let us know how we can help. Thank you, guys.